Okay, aloha nui kako. Okay, I'm gonna only ask for one more time. Those of you sitting in the back, if you can move to the front. We'd really appreciate you being fully participating in our panels. Okay, mahalo nui. All right, let's get started. This panel is on the history of Hawaiian education, and we have some awesome people to share with us. So I'm just gonna quickly go through the bios for each. As you can see, we're joined by Dr. Kēhau Neni Abad, who's at the top. She is a keiki Owaiʻanai who now lives in Honolulu and whose kulaiwi includes Kohala Loko on Hawaiʻi and Honopo and Pauvela here on Maui. She serves as the director of Kealaiwi Kuamo'o at Kamehameha Schools, leading a team that supports collaboration among Kanaio Kana, a Paeaina-wide network of some 80 schools, preschools through graduate school, and Hawaiian organizations focused on strengthening the Lahui and growing Aloha Aina leaders through collaboration as a Hawaiian education system. The Kealaiwi Kuamo'o team also works on developing kaulu programs for Keiki Opio. Some of you may have worked on kaulu or used some of their programs. For Keiki Opio and Ohana in partnership with community organizations and creating curriculum for the Waihona. Her research work focuses on ali'i in pre-contact times and wahi kupuna. Here with us in person is Kahele Dukelow, who was born and raised on the island of Maui and is also a graduate of Baldwin High School. Oh, go, maroon and blue, is that what it is?
Lisa almost erased that.
She holds a bachelor's degree in Hawaiian Studies and a master's degree in education, started her career in education as an elementary and middle school teacher at Nākula Kaiapuni o Pāʻia, Waiau, and Anuenue, and spent the last 20 years teaching Hawaiian Studies and language at the University of Hawaii Maui College. She's currently the Dean of Arts and Sciences. I'm so proud of you. At UHMC, Kahele is committed to building our Lahui, our people, and Aina through education, language, history, culture, politics, and most of all, as we heard this morning, kuleana. Kaʻimi Watson, aloha, is from, you're gonna see me go like this, but that's where you are for me. Is from the island of Oahu. His family lives in the valley of Palolo, and he spends much time in the rains which fall upon the university in Manoa. He is an Oiwi philosopher and historian in an occupied nation. His research swims in the areas of Oiwi philosophy as captured in Mo'olelo and the history of Hawaii, especially the history of education. His current research projects, his current research projects focus on agnotology in a Hawaii context. Haole ignorance. Welcome, Kaʻimi Watson. Aloha. Yes, aloha and welcome to all of our esteemed panelists today. We're gonna start with this first question, and I'm gonna start with Dr. Abad, Kēhau, and you'll start and then we'll go to Kahele and then to Kaʻimi, okay? But the first question is, what is Hawaiian education?
I'm gonna be really brief because I know we have such a short amount of time. I think a lot of the what is often the part that people focus on, but I really think the why of Hawaiian education is so crucial. And to me, that's all about, ho'olu lahui, ho'olu aina, ho'olu ohana, and beyond, not just our pai aina here. But if we're not having that sense of kuleana to do that, to engage in ho'olu, then whatever kind of ikena that we're gaining along the way is really kind of poho, right? That's what it's all about, is what we're going to be able to do to help feed, help inspire, help grow our ohana, our lahi, and our community. I often think too that the where of Hawaiian education is sometimes not emphasized as much as we should. And of course, in a school setting, we often think about, what's happening here in a kula, but so much of the most important learning for our haʻaʻana really occurs outside of the schools, outside of the classrooms. So the importance of ohana, the importance of kaiau, the importance of all of the different experiences that, in partnership with the kula, we can bring to a haʻaʻana by connecting them to these places, especially aina, right? Aina experiences. So sort of the where, I think, is crucial for that. On the one part that I wish we could spend more time on is this sense of ike kupuna, that is ike papalua. I think we're missing a lot of that along the way, and kind of beating that out of our opio when we're having them focus on so much of the analytical kind stuffs. But anyway, I'll stop there. There's plenty more I would want to say, but lama.
Mahalo.
Aloha kako. So what is Hawaiian education? We just, heard Kalekua talk about purpose, kuleana, those kinds of things. But I do think that when you look at the history of education, it helps us to determine where we are and how we can develop that purpose that is intentionally developed separately from the sort of dominant purpose. So when you look at education during the kingdom period, and I'll talk more about this in the second question, but when you look at education in the kingdom period, it was very clear that it was this national, communal push towards literacy, but also towards peoplehood and nationhood. That was very clear during the kingdom period. When you look at the territorial period, it was also very clear that it was the opposite of that. Education was a push against Hawaiian nationhood and Hawaiian peoplehood. When you look at the statehood period, right, circa 1959, it was very much, education was very much about showing America what good Americans we can be, even though we're not white, right? So when we think about where we're at in education, that 1959 is not too long ago.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Watch yourself. Watch yourself.
Some of us were alive.
And so is Pele.
But when you think about what Hawaiian education is to us today, I think that emerges out of the 1978 Con when they insert Hawaiian as an official language, and they also insert a clause for Hawaiian education programs. That spawns the 1980 policy in the DOE for Hawaiian studies education, 7th grade, Hawaiian history, 11th grade history. That is what I think, that's where we have grown from today in developing what Hawaiian education is in the modern era, right? And it's a struggle because I think as we, we're 42 years into this even idea of, shut up. Couple decades, more than a couple decades, 4 decades. But when we talk about Hawaiian education today, I think that's what we're building on. We're trying to figure out, right, after all of the decades of education being about American assimilation, right? The 1978 clause, the 1980 policy was really Hawaiian saying, hey, we want to reclaim some of that. We want a space in this education where we have been absent for all of those decades. So if I had to say, what is Hawaiian education today? It's trying to figure that out, how we strengthen that, right? And, one of the things to remember, since 1980, there has been no increase in the Department of Education in regards to Hawaiian history. And you just think about how much more we know about history, our own history, how much we have changed in all of those decades. And they're still way back when, right? So as a private school, right, you guys should have the freedom to move quicker, right? Because you're not bound, and not just to state stuff, but to federal policy. I tell you what, in the DOE, fighting federal policy is huge, right? You guys don't have that. You guys have your own, I understand that, but it is not the federal government. Anyway, so if I had to say what Hawaiian education is, I think it, of course, we heard, you gotta differentiate Hawaiian education from just education in Hawaii or education for Hawaiians, right? And that is the struggle that we're in. Anyway.
Mahalo. Kaʻimi?
Aloha. Sorry, on mute, but I spoke with my eyes. So yeah, what is Hawaiian education? I think, my current focus and all my projects focus on agnotology, and most people are like, what is that? It's the study of ignorance and how ignorance is created and cultivated and for purposeful, on purpose, right? So then, in this question is, what is Hawaiian education? We could just pause, breathe for a little bit, and go, oh, Hawaiian is a haole word. Period. Hawaiian is a haole word. So then when you're thinking about education, like education in Hawaii, education of Hawaii, Hawaii education, when you're using the words or the phrase Hawaiian education, then you've translated Hawaii and its learning and its ideas of iniloa for the consumption of an other that is possibly not Hawaii. And so it's just kind of like this thinking. And I think both the kumu before me, I'm just like so honored to be on this panel with these people, is that it's this word Hawaiian education, it's for who and how is it being defined, and then for whose consumption. But I think both the previous panelists have said it's focusing on the why. Because if you're doing Hawaiian education without knowing the why, then it becomes performative, right? If you dance hula but not know the why, then you're performing. If you dance hula and you know the why, then you're participating in ceremony. So that idea of then what is Hawaiian education, our history is super important to know. And like was brought up about KS's ability to be freer, then you have to ask, what is shackling it from being Hawaii education? And it's remaining in this realm of Hawaiian education. And so history, it's important. I think so. I better press mute again, and I'll speak with my eyes. Aloha.
Mahalo nui. We'll move to the next question. What kuleana was understood by our ali'i in terms of public education in the kingdom, and how did ancestral knowledge inform that kuleana? So I'm going to start with Kahele, and then we'll repeat that circuit. Kahele, then Kaʻimi, then Kēhau.
Okay, so I'm going to start with the first couple of lines from the Hawaiian Kingdom Law that proclaimed by Kamehameha III in 1840 that establishes public education in the Hawaiian Kingdom. O ka na'awao a me ka ike, o ia ke kumu e pono ai ki au puni. O ka na'awao a me ka ike, o ia ke kumu e pono ai ki au puni. So we have na'awao and we have ike, education and knowledge. And what the second half of that is saying that this is the thing that will help our aupuni, our nation, endure. These are the things that will make our nation survive. Okay, so this is the first line in the law that establishes public education. It's very clear that the purpose is about peoplehood and nationhood. The second line in the law says, "A'ole e malu mai ka'i ka'aina, a'ole ho'i e kua papanui." Right? Malu mai ka'i. The land will not be protected. And kua papanui means to live in peace under one rule. Right? So you can see that, you know, again, it's not about individual gain. It's not about just personal enlightenment. This is about a people and their independence. So when I think about what did our ali'i understand about education, they saw education as a tool, right, that they employed broadly. Again, in this law, also in this law, is that every child between the ages of 4 and 15 would go to school. And this is in 1840. They understood the need and the kuleana, not just to all people, but also to maintain their independence among the nations of the world. 1 year later, in 1841, so David Malo is appointed the first superintendent over all schools. And 1 year later, so this is a law, 1840, right? Proclaims the law. 1 year later, David Malo writes this and you're going to appreciate, very organized and well-written report about about the educational system that has developed in Hawaii since then. And when I first saw that, our friend Nalani actually showed that to me, and I was like, wow. In a very short period of time, schools were everywhere. Every small village, every island, thousands and thousands and thousands of students were in schools within a couple of years, right? So when I think of how our ali'i understood that, right, not just proclaiming a law, but also having the skill and the organization to develop those systems very quickly into our communities, into every single community. Again, not just, you know, the ports or, you know, Kahului, central areas, everywhere. Kaupo, everywhere in Hawaii was touched with public education. So did our ali'i understand the importance? Absolutely. And they also had the wherewithal to develop it and organize it very quickly.
Mahalo. Yeah, we're ready for you, Manao.
Okay, my turn. So yeah, with that question, what I was thinking about is the idea of the kuleana of the ali'i. I think it's understanding of it was a kuleana of everybody. And it wasn't, I think the idea again was, what is the purpose of education? And at that time, schools were seen as expanding what was happening at home, as opposed to usurping and subcontracting out to happen elsewhere. It was a continuity that happened. Yeah, that it wasn't, because even then, now we think about, yeah, like how I said, Hawaiian is a Hollywood. This idea of being educated in schools is itself also foreign. And so when we look at the first school established for the ali'i, they had to explain what was going on. Like, okay, we're gonna go. We're gonna take these kids to this place, they're gonna live with the cooks for a little bit. But in the first rules, that explanation is that the cooks were makua and kumu. So not just kumu, but makua and kumu. And so in this idea of the kuleana of the ali'i, then you flip to right, because then it's the kuleana of the makua, and the kuleana then of the child that's within that system. So yeah, I think, yeah, there you go. And scene.
Mahalo. Kēhau. I'll repeat the question for everyone here. What kuleana was understood by our ali'i in terms of public education in the kingdom, and how did ancestral knowledge inform that kuleana?
I thought like we had 3 questions and this was the one I was going to focus on. So I actually got plenty to say on this one.
No, please do. We were, and then I decided I want to hear all your mana'o. So, yeah, it was divided up. They each had a question. Then I was like, nah, let's have them all answer this specific question. So yeah, Kēhau, this was your question. So go for it.
Can I share screen? Is that possible?
Bren, can she share screen?
Or Brent, can you go to bit.ly/EDUC with a capital E, Hawaiian Kingdom. EDUC with a capital E.
I love that we all understand this, yeah? That we all get it.
I don't know whether it's easier for you.
No, hiki oi ke ka'analike, Kēhau. Yeah,
Should I
no,
just
no.
share screen?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go try. You know what? I think I better not try to do it this way. If you guys all heard I'm having computer problems. I'm on my son's Mac laptop. I'm not ma'atidis and it's not seeming to work the way I expect it to. But if you go to that bit.ly one, so it's EDUC Hawaiian Kingdom. Hawaiian and Kingdom are, so the E is cap, the H is cap, and the K is cap. So I did a quick.
Can you drop it in the chat, Kēhau?
Yeah.
Yeah, drop it in the chat and then they'll be able to just click on the link and open it. What else is going on in that chat? Whose favorite color? What?
Okay, in the meantime, though, I'll just kind of quick. I want to go all the way back to, if you think about the kuleana of ali'i, gotta go like way, way back. Like, so I'm talking like 13 generations before Kamehameha, Ma'ili Kukahi. So Ma'ili Kukahi, he's on It's amazing, amazing ali'i who is known for all sorts of wonderful things. Among them is the fact that he, in preparation for possible invasions, because his predecessor had had an invasion from other islands raiding on Oahu. In preparation for that, he said, okay, I'm going to malama all the firstborn sons of every ohana on this mokupuni of Oahu. And we are going to create, for the first time ever, a standing army. So in a lot of ways, this was like a formal education system set up. And they were taught not just the rudiments of battle, but all the kinds of things that were needed to take care of a nation. So he was really setting up a whole system of kanaka who would malama. And because the ohana were so grateful for this opportunity and this honor that he was providing to each of their firstborn sons, they would send him send the court, all sorts of ho'okupu, to mahalo, to malama, their keiki that was being raised there. So from a very, very ancient time, there's a sense that it is, like Kaʻimi is saying, a kākou thing. We are all part of this. We're all engaged in this. We all have a stake in it. In order to take care of our nation, so the why of it, right? Not because I like be smart and I like be da-da-I. It's a we. It's a kākou. It's that whole community. Fast forward to times like in Umi's time. So Umi kicked it up a big notch too, because now we're talking like 9 generations before Kamehameha. So Umi on Hawaiʻi Island, he is known, for all kinds of amazing things, one of which is that he set up specialization of trades. So he's the one that said, hey, all you guys who are excellent at ba'a, kalai ba'a, that's what you're going to be doing. Never mind, we'll take care of how you're going to get fed. Never mind, we'll take care of how you're going to get hale. We want you to focus on this. And by doing this for all of the different areas, and in Kamakaʻu ruling chiefs, he goes through all of the different areas and get plenty. And so all of this specialization that was occurring during that time just kicked everything up a notch, because now the people who were really expert could focus only on that. So you got the really great guys doing even more. So those, that just gives you a sample of what, there's plenty more in that PowerPoint thing, but I want to stop so we can have time talking about other stuff. But that's just a sample of the kinds of things that demonstrate how the thinking was at that time. It was always for, okay, so, obviously I carve my canoe, right? I don't even know how to canoe, but why am I getting good at it? Because I'm going to teach other people how they can carve awesome canoes, and I'm going to be helping them so that my labor is going into it too. And that's what that was about. And so if you were lucky enough to be kohoʻia for that training, that was another thing, right? It wasn't like, oh, I like do this, I like do that, and like, oh, what is that that's really like jiving with you, syncing with you? And the people who had that ikena to see that in the keiki would then malama those skills. So if you were so honored enough to be chosen by that kalaiwa to do that, like, super awesome. So that sense of identity and a place in community, right? It was so much more pa'a and so much more natural and so much more honored. Everybody had a place. Everybody had a kuleana. All of it was important because the whole of it not going to work if one of these kinds of things not there. Anyway, okay. No, sorry. Get excited about these kinds of stuff.
No, that's good. Kēhau, I don't think you can see, but we have the PowerPoint up, so we could take it back to the slide that you want to talk about.
Okay. We can. I kind of just talking, but there's all kinds of stuff in there. You guys can kind of just explore what's in there.
Hikino. Mahalo nui. I think all of you are really excited. You have to see all of those different photos and what it all means. Mahalo nui. We're going to go to the next question, and this is actually Kahele's question, but I'm going to give a chance to the other two to also share on it. What impact has Kaiapuni education had on the Lahui? What impact has Kamehameha School's education had on the Lahui? Be honest, tell the truth. We're ready for it.
Well, nobody told me this was my question, so I was just preparing something short. But what impact has the Kaiapuni education had on the Lahui? I'll start with a personal sort of transformation that I think one day, maybe I'll start with something different. So we all know what Kaiapuni education is, right? It's this Hawaiian language immersion, started in 1986 in the public education system. On Maui, it started here at Paia. Parents had to beg a principal, beg the DOE to include Hawaiian language. The only reason it got started at Paia is because their enrollment was in decline, and maybe he was a nice principal, I'm not sure. I don't know, I didn't know him. But the only reason that he agreed was because his school was in danger of closing because he had lost enrollment. So when I think about, how Hawaiian language immersion schools start, it's through struggle, it's through parents, it's through teachers, community members out there who really fought and struggled, people in this room, to establish Kaiapuni education. And we have essentially saved the language from demise, I think. It has been a huge part of growing new generations of Hawaiian speakers. We've done it. Has it been easy? No. Is the struggle over? No. We are in continuous struggle to do that work. Because I don't think we're out of the, we're out of, now we know and, it's all good. No, it's a continuous struggle, not just for resources and the place in the DOE, but also it's a struggle for people to believe. Not just the DOE people, not just non-Hawaiians, but I think Hawaiians themselves to believe that this is something that we should be doing. I'm also going to say that Kula Kaya Puni, Hawaiian language immersion, is not just about language. It's about revitalizing Lahui through language. Language being the major tool that allows us to access our history and our identity and our sense of humanity. So as I said, we struggle. And those of you who have been through immersion, you know it. I see parents and pukana here and former teachers. We struggle. And one day I was in a meeting with other people who work in immersion, and it's a lot of stress trying to figure out how you grow and develop a program under very oppressive, in a very oppressive institution. And one of our people goes, maybe we just gotta scrap it and do something else. It's so hard to figure this out, right? We cannot find teachers, the world of challenges. And you know what? I don't even know if our language is good enough, right? And this is after 6 hours of meeting, so we were all a little stressed. But then I told, I was like, you know what? I said, Kayapuni allows anybody who wants this education to be part of it. That's opposite of what you guys do. I said, if Kayapuni, because they were also saying, well, KS get plenty of money, they should do it. If we left Kayapuni and KS, right, it would be a selected few. Anybody who wants to learn Hawaiian language, anybody who wants to put their child is able to, if there is a Kayapuni available. I said, in my own family, I went to Baldwin High School when there was no Hawaiian language, right? Hawaiian was not a part of my upbringing. I did not learn it in school. I went to college and I learned Hawaiian. I had children. Kalekoa and I said, we are speaking Hawaiian to our kids. Our kids will be educated in Hawaiian. I have 8 brothers and sisters. And when Ho'o, our oldest, was ready to go to kindergarten, we had always said we would move back to Maui. So, and I guess I'm also bossy, but because immersion was a public school, every niece and nephew that I had was able to attend Kayapuni, right? I have 8 siblings. Because of that, in one generation, right, we were able to reverse the death of a language, right? The whole, my children's generation in my family, everybody can speak Hawaiian. And that is after 2 generations of not being able to speak Hawaiian, partly due to the public education system, and also Kamehameha, right? So when I think about, this is just one large family. If you have the will and the commitment, and you took that opportunity, you can reverse history. And I think, again, this is just one example of how that's done. And this has happened in many families, right? Families like Akela's family, right? language that had not been spoken in families for 2, sometimes 3 generations is now flourishing. That being said, I also feel like immersion also pushed Kamehameha to do things that are more Hawaiian. It spawned charter schools, culture-based charter schools. It changed the DOE in 35 years. It really has changed the DOE. It has made some pretty large institutional changes. We have an Office of Hawaiian Education, right? That is because of the movement of Pulakaiapuni. So when I think about, when we think about Hawaiian education and what the purpose is, I think we're all still struggling over that, right? It's a daily struggle that we have to remind ourselves and keep ourselves centered about what that is, not just individually, but collectively. But individually, right? You really got to be honest with yourself about what you believe and what you want and what the purpose is. Because if we all think that the purpose is just for our kids to get a good education and get a good job so that they can buy a house, that might happen for 5% of us, but the rest of us will still be suffering. So if the point is not revitalizing Lahui and gaining power so that we can make our own decisions, you know, then like Kēhau said, poho. And then the last thing I will say is just great gains in 30 plus years. Huge changes, but so much more to go and still struggling, always struggling. And we will probably struggle for the next 2 generations. Oye, hola.
Mahalo. Yeah, frustrating, and yet at the same time exhilarating. You know, you go between all of these emotions when you're in Kaiapuni education.
Kuleana.
Kuleana is what moves you, though. Kaʻimi, you have any mana'o towards this? Or Kēhau?
Kakaʻopeha, I'll leave it there. Kahele is your vegan. Kako.
Mahalo. Kaʻimi, have any mana'o?
Just everything that she said, and then the only thing that I could possibly add is, in addition to what she said, I know that idea of like, let's just pause, right, and think. Because what does it say when the system funded by the occupying government moves faster than an elite trust on these things?
Talking with your eyes,
the other thing I ask is about just the definition of the word genocide, or I'll put forth, right? Defined by Raphael Lemkin, who's an international expert on international law. And so he's the one that kind of made up the word genocide. And so he said genocide has 2 phases. First, the destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group. And second, the imposition of the national patterns of the oppressor. So now when we look at the idea of national patterns, is language alone a national pattern? So like that idea now that like Laiana Wong and Noea Warner talked about like speaking English in Hawaiian, right? Speaking American with savage sounds kind of deal. So now we have come a long way. And so with this idea where we do have language, and at this point that we're reconnecting with history, right? Because no longer are we reading histories in translation. We're reading like original accounts. And not to say that the Hawaii account is going to be the true one, and not to say that the Haole one was the true one, but somewhere in the space between the two is what sings to you, right? And what resonates your truth. And so with this idea of language and history, and then it's philosophy. And so that's why I'm in philosophy, is why? What is the purpose of education? And I think that is the answer as far as like, what is the impact of Kaiapuni and impact of KS? We're moving in this direction, but looking at the why. In this education and in everything that you do is if you look at the Y, and the core of that Y is like kulolo, then you probably hit it. But if you look at the kind, at the core of it, and it's ice cream with kulolo sprinkles, then maybe that's not it. And you have to just figure out what is the foundation. Because I go, ice cream and kulolo taste lovely together. But then it's like, no, what do you want more of? I want kulolo with no, have kulolo, small scoop ice cream, you know what I mean? And we're good. But then if I get vanilla ice cream with kulolo sprinkles, I might be dissatisfied. So yeah, I'm seeing.
I'm all about the kulolo. Main dish. Mahalo nui. You know, for those of you who have not yet signed up for breakout sessions, there's a breakout session that will include 3 alumni from Kamehameha Maui, but also alumni from Kulakaiapuni, who will be doing a breakout session, who are now kumu at Ke Kula Kaipuni o Maui Mapaia. So you might want to join them in the high school dining hall. That might be interesting to continue this conversation. This final question.
I can say something real fast.
Yeah.
Just to point out, because I go, I'm highly critical of chaos, but I am chaos. I go, it is chaos' fault that I exist. So I go, we have this pilina, and it's an active verb, but it's piliapa, like we are stuck together. Because yeah, I am chaos' fault. But in this idea of I am chaos' fault is this idea of kuleana. And so please know that too, that I do have this deep love and bond. At the same time, it's that love and bond that forces us to be honest, yeah, as a KS alumnus. So yeah, sorry.
Kēhau.
Can I add? I forgot that there was a question about the KS part. I want to appreciate and just hold up the students that I've had over time, and I know that the little drop that I added into their pot was just a drop. But everything that they got from their Kamehameha education, from their communities, from their ohana, all of that in totality grew some amazing people. And I think about the honor I had to have some of the students that were sitting in my classroom. And thank goodness. I'd like to think I was a passionate kumu and that I gave it my all. I feel good now, thinking back at that. I know there were so many other kumu who were doing the same thing, giving it their all, and somehow, some way, with all these influences, some amazing people came out of that process. And so, and they're doing wonderful things, leading amazing lives, and doing incredible things for our lahui. And so, and Bruce, you're one of them, right? Again, I can't.
Her first year teaching, she was my homeroom teacher.
But yeah, no, so I just want to say, like, if you look at what the output is, right? Let's look at our alumni, and something's going on there. I mean, I know KS cannot take full credit, but some credit. Something is going on there, and there are good things. So mahalo to everybody who's doing the watering, and wish I could be in the classroom again. I missed that, but you guys are doing amazing things, and I know you see it in your graduates too.
Mahalo nui. Yeah, there's a bunch of us trying, planting seeds, watering, doing what we can, trying to move the trajectory at least 2 points off from where it's been, right? This last question actually will start with Kaʻimi because it was written for you, but again, our other 2 panelists can share. In your opinion, what does the next 30 years of Hawaiian education look like?
So it's hard, this idea of dreaming. What does it look like in 30 years? I think that, like was said before, so much work has been done and is being done, and unfortunately we continue to work against the grain. the establishing Kaiapuni schools are still hard. We recently celebrated our 30th year alumni reunion. Yeah, and like Kumabad said, we got to reunite with all our classmates and see what everyone is doing. And one of them is fighting to create a new Kaiapuni school out on the leeward side because the only one, and then we have brand new trustee, recently coronated. She got her tiara on Tuesday. Goodyear Kaupua. So it's we have hope, right? And it's this idea, I think, too, that was said earlier, Oihana. When Umi was talking about, Kumaba was talking about Umi and the specialization of trades, that we each are allowed and given space to do our very best, because in our being our very best, we contribute to us all becoming the best. And that idea of community, that was completely not individualistic. And so for me, it's in the next 30 years, what I hope is that instead of going to education wise so you get a job, it's going to school and learning to become a better citizen and a better part of the community, as like when Keiko Naoa was Minister of Education. Now that I'm teaching at university, my theory is always, the idea of planting seeds. I cultivate curiosity and kolohe. I think as much as I'm a product of KS, there's a bias that comes with that as well, right? Because so many times we were taught that good and industrious got conflated with quiet and compliant. At the coronation of Goodyear on Tuesday, we sang. And in the singing, we noticed, we talked about it, we laughed, because we cannot sing melody. I know so many Hawaiʻi songs that I cannot sing the melody to. I can only sing my part, and that's the part I know, and the part that I know. And so I think that if in the next 30 years, more of us look to Kalakaua and think of why. Like, you never wake up on a Tuesday, winds from the east, I'm gonna write a new national anthem, right? But he did, and he wrote that new national anthem for our purpose. And you look at that third pauku, that what was his idea of an ideal citizen? What is their like the manui of their existence, but to ask questions and to activate. And I think once we get, instead of measuring by a set of learned skills, but giving space for each of us to be our oi and do our oi in the oiest of ways, then that is a Hawaiʻi education. And that is a Hawaiʻi I hope to see that can't help but be fabulous and an awesome contributor to the entire universe. So yeah.
Mahalo. Any mana'o from either Kēhau or Kahele or both?
I'll say something and then Kēhau can end. When I think about what Hawaiian education will look like in 30 years, I tend to look backwards because, history helps us to analyze our present. And I think that it's really important for all of you in this room today to analyze your situation right now with that historical perspective. So you know why you're in the place you're at, in the school you're at, with all the money you got, how it began, and I think you guys, I think you had a kind of rude awakening not so long ago with that report from the American Indian boarding schools, right? That should pique your interest. And you guys should be having those conversations. What was that? Why would our school be included there, right? What does that tell us about, and I think somebody mentioned, what is shackling us today? Are we shackled? Or are we compliant? Or are we where we want to be? I don't know, right? Those are all the things that you guys got to think about and talk about. And that we all have, not you guys, I say that all of us, you're in a particular institution. For us who work in public education, we have the same kind of analysis to do continuously, right? In order to figure out where we're gonna go. But when I think about where we're gonna be in 30 years, again, I look back generations. I look at my parents, I look at my grandparents, and I look at my great-grandparents. I look at myself, I look at my children, right? 3 generations ago, we were a Hawaiian language speaking, independent-minded nation. And when I look forward, in 30 years, which will be about the same time, right? 3 more generations. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm not looking forward to working in an institution that doesn't value us as a people, as a lahui, that I have to be careful about saying lahui, a people. That's still something that people go like, oh, you're talking about Hawaiians like they're a people? Yes. We are a people on our land. So when I think about what Hawaiian education is going to be, it should be about, it's about reclaiming all of those things. Language, culture, nation. And if, you're like, what? God, that makes my na'au turn. It makes mine turn too, because that's big kuleana. But the opposite is to say, that we don't deserve the right to determine for ourselves. And I'm not ever gonna say that. We can make better decisions for ourselves than people are making for us today. And that's what we should be looking forward to for Hawaiian education. That's what we should be working towards. Because if not, why spend all this money just to assimilate? Why? Right? We need to believe in ourselves and believe that we can do a better job and that we can be here for another for thousands of years to come. But I don't think that's going to happen if we're under the thumb and if we are continuing to value their pono over our pono. So.
Mahalo.
Like both of Kahele and Kaʻimi, one of the things that I want to do is look back, right? So I want to share just one quote from Joseph Navahi Okolaniupu'u, who, and before I say this, it's going to be a surprising quote, and I'll explain the context real fast, but normally when we think of him as this person who is so o'olea about our ike kupuna, about our olelo Hawaiʻi, and that is really what we is kupono to remember about him. In addition, at the time when our sovereignty was being threatened, right? This was after the Bayonet Constitution. In 1891, this is going to be just right before the overthrow. He's already seen the writing on the wall, and he says, but just as I have said, there is but one alternative left for us for saving our country, and that to have Hawaiian youth educated abroad. And he was talking about the initiative that Kalakaua had supported, and that had by that point had gotten pulled back right after the Bayonet Constitution. 18 Kanaka, who were the most promising, were sent out around the world to make alliances with and gain knowledge so that our strength as a Hawaiian kingdom could be bolstered by alliances with others who are like-minded. So 30 years from now, I see us doing something similar. This whole honua is so messed up, and there are people who are like-minded like us all over this planet. Think about like land-back efforts that are going on planet-wide, joining with them, and we are, right? So how do we, so it's not just like this go abroad just for the sake of gaining this Western knowledge and using it as a tool, but rather also going out there and aligning with others who are going to be able to together, right, everybody holomua and everybody support one another, because I think the scale of what's needed at this point, not just for our pai'aina, but for the entirety of our honua, requires that we start scaling up, right? Who are all the people who have like values that scale up and join hands? And it's even happening in the Bronx of all places, right? You try to look at the Bronx Cooperative Initiative, or it's amazing what they're doing there. And it's all about social justice, political justice. And so to me, that's a really promising front. And it's something that our ali'i were trying to encourage long ago. So.
I can just add one more thing, just because as an assignment from what Kahele and Kumu Abad just kind of did, that you can take right now and consider yourself and get to your haumana as well. Because, okay, so I got two things. I want you to think, how come at Kamehameha schools you cannot serve haole brownies, but you can serve plantation iced tea? Right? You cannot say the word haole because it's offensive, but you can say plantation. And then think of like all the baggage that comes with the word plantation. Who gets to drink iced tea on the plantation? What does that pineapple, whose blood does it taste like? So then there's that. The other assignment I want you to do is, and I gave to my students in the history of education on the day of Noelani Goodyear Kaupua becoming trustee. I had them write a 2-voice poem. And I had them use it, beginning with KS resources, because what KS puts on its website of its history of the first trustees. So it's under the website ksbe.edu, Pauahi's legacy, the first trustees, and what it says and how it describes those first trustees. Using KS resources, go look at that, because that's quite a cartoon. And then look what it says about Noe Goodyear. And because Noe Goodyear is a present person among us, a friend, a person that we love possibly, I love very much, look at how they describe her, what parts of her legacy and her work are being described in the KS Post, and compare them to what is posted using outside sources that aren't KS. So looking at, critically analyzing KS's own story of its own self, what it puts forward. And so like in that idea of what you put forward is what you want others to see. I don't have to Google Noe Goodyear Kaupua to know who she is. But if I did and that website comes up, what is it saying? I don't have to Google Charles Reed Bishop to know who he is, Charles. But if I do, and I look at the KSB website, what does it say? What parts of his story are neglected and completely omitted? And so there's obviously this ignorance in plain sight. So Haole Brownies, plantation iced tea, and just KS's history of itself as it puts forth. Go Google and go.
Mahalo nui for the assignment. I just want to acknowledge that we've been blessed to have these experts, these scholars who have researched, who are akamai, who are beyond akamai, but they've given us some kuleana. From Kahele we received that. So if it piques your interest, nui'i, do the research, check it out. Kleikoa always says, don't believe me, do your own research, find out for yourself. Because it's not enough to just sit here and believe everything that we hear. Question, read, research. I have to admit it's because of him that I read more than I've ever, and read things that are not comfortable, but thank you, Brenna. From Kaʻimi, we hear cultivate curiosity and kolohe. That's a piece, there's a dissertation being written right now. Kolohe is akamai. I married a kolohe. I know. They're akamai. And there's another kolohe. So these kolohe ones, they do good work. And they're there for the lahui. And also, from Kēhau, she talked about ike papa'alua. She didn't really go into it. That's your kuleana. Ike papa'alua is one of the most important gifts that we have as Kanaka Maoli. I talk about this all the time. When we walk into a space, we can read a room, and we read it with our na'au, not with our brains, not with our heads, but we use every lonoa kino that we have, our eyes, our ears, our touch, sense of touch, but most importantly, this sixth sense, this intuition that we have, and that has to be honed. So if you want to talk about Ike Papalua, let's go, because this is good stuff that we need to know. So again, mahalo to Dr. Ahmad, to Kaʻimi Watson, and Kahele Dukelow. Mahalo nui.
I was just again touch base from that, but that was good fun. Mahalo.
Mahalo. Okay, we're going to move to our breakout sessions. I think we're a little behind, so just run. I'll see you there. Aloha.